Not long ago, we made a video for people who have way too many interests. But some of you asked me about the exact opposite situation. What if your problem isn't having too many interests? What if you just don't feel interested in anything? You scroll online and see people sharing their projects, their travels, and their art. You don't necessarily envy their achievements, but you wonder how they still have that spark. Because when you try to start a new hobby, a thought immediately hits you. It just feels boring, pointless, and exhausting. You remember getting completely lost in things as a kid, but that feeling faded somewhere along the way. And now, the only thing left that gives you a tiny bit of stimulation is scrolling through your phone. The confusing part is that you're pretty sure you aren't mentally ill. You can still work, joke around, and function normally. But inside, you keep asking yourself, why don't I care anymore? Why does everyone else have something they love, and I don't? A sociologist named Corey Keyes calls this specific gray zone languishing. You can score low in mental illness, meaning you might not meet the criteria for clinical depression, but still have low mental health, meaning very little vitality, engagement, or sense of purpose. It's that strange gray zone where you are getting by, but not really flourishing. And because it is so subtle, it is easy for society, and even for you, to ignore it. So, how do we actually find our way out of this gray zone? Well, this is where most of us fall into a very common trap. We usually assume we need a massive spark of motivation to start something new. We think passion has to come first, but behavioral research points to something more counterintuitive. Motivation isn't always the prerequisite for action. Very often, it's the byproduct of it. Waiting until you feel inspired is exactly what keeps you stuck. You have to start moving first, so your system can slowly generate the energy and interest you're waiting for. So today, the goal isn't to suddenly discover your one true passion. We are going to look at how taking ridiculously small actions can rebuild your internal drive from the outside in. But first, we have to ask, how do you actually end up in a place where nothing sounds appealing? It doesn't happen overnight. It usually begins when your daily life slowly stops giving you 3 basic psychological nutrients. These are things that are absolutely vital for human motivation: a sense of choice, a sense of growth, and a sense of connection. We usually assume that workload is what drains us most, but a major source of exhaustion is high demand with low autonomy. A lot is expected from you, but you have very little say in how it gets done. When your environment makes you feel powerless, you naturally start taking less action. And when you act less, you get less feedback from the world. Without that feedback, you start to feel less capable. You just get stuck in a draining, low feedback loop. Eventually, to conserve energy, your brain starts acting like a cautious internal accountant. It develops a kind of low effort bias. When you think about trying anything new, it tends to overestimate the energy it will take and underestimate the potential joy it might bring. Since the math rarely works out, your system holds back. It becomes harder to generate the drive you need to actually get started. This explains the most confusing part of languishing too. If a friend drags you out to a great dinner, you'll probably still laugh and genuinely enjoy yourself. Your capacity to enjoy an experience may still be there, but the actual desire to plan that dinner, to seek out that experience in the first place, is just gone. It turns out, in neuroscience, liking and wanting are governed by distinct pathways. Your capacity to like something is often largely intact, but the system that generates the wanting, the drive to actually go out and look for it, is underactive. And because that internal engine of desire is shut down, just sitting around waiting to feel motivated is only going to make you feel worse. We have to gently restart it from the outside. If you're still watching this, I assume a part of you genuinely wants to get out of this gray zone. But I also know that when you're in this state, even the idea of working on yourself can feel like one more thing you don't have energy for. So we are not doing a life overhaul here. And just to be clear, if what you are feeling is severe, persistent, or unsafe, please reach out for professional support. But if you are in that gray zone of languishing, we're gonna let go of all the overwhelming long-term plans. We're gonna treat this like a low-stakes sandbox. Think of it like starting a fire. You don't have to generate all the roaring heat yourself. You just have to push yourself to strike a match, and the fire will eventually catch and burn on its own. So for the first phase, your only job is to strike that very first match. The easiest way to do that is micro-exploration. Add 1% of novelty to something you already know, so your brain gets new input without feeling overwhelmed. Take a different route to work. Clean one drawer in your kitchen. Send a quick text to an old friend. Listen to a 5-minute podcast about a topic you know nothing about. And that's it. You don't need to analyze whether it was productive or meaningful. You just want to notice the sensation of doing something different. You're just looking for that tiny, fleeting feeling of, oh, this is actually kind of fun. You're gently feeding your dopamine system a micro dose of feedback, letting it remember what it feels like to engage with the world. When you do these tiny things for a few days, your internal accountant starts to calculate effort and reward a bit more accurately. You might feel a little more present, or maybe just a little less stuck. Now, you can strike the second match. You move into the exploration phase. You have a bit more energy, but you probably still have no idea what you actually want to do next. That's completely normal. Since you don't feel any passion right now, don't look for it. Instead, look for your strengths. What do people naturally ask you for help with? What tasks feel hard, but not exhausting? You can look back at your past, or take a free online strengths test, like the VIA survey, to give you a compass. Now, just look around at the environment you're already in, and the resources you already have. What's the easiest door to open from here? Let that guide you to pick 1 to 3 experiments that feel close enough, cheap enough, and simple enough to start this week. If you're naturally good at organizing and you have a hard drive full of unedited travel photos, maybe you start by sorting them for 10 minutes. If you want to try something physical and there's a local class right down your street, then you can start there. But there is a rule here. You have to try each experiment at least 3 times before you make a judgment. The first time is always awkward. And to make sure you actually get to that 3rd try, you can use a simple if-then plan to handle the friction. Be honest with yourself about your obstacles. For example, let's say I know I always collapse on the couch after dinner. Then my plan becomes, if I sit down on the couch, I will immediately open my laptop and sort photos for exactly 12 minutes before doing anything else. You make the choice ahead of time. That way, when you're tired, you don't have to argue with yourself. You just follow the script. As you move from these experiments into the final phase of integration, your only job is to broadly record how you feel. Don't ask if the activity has a deeper meaning. Just ask, did this give me a little bit of energy, or did it drain me? If an experiment was boring and completely drained you, that is perfectly fine. You just drop it and pick another one to try. Any action, even 10 minutes of trying something that did not work, gives your brain new input. And that gives your mind more to work with than staying frozen in the same loop of self-doubt. Eventually, you'll have a pile of data. You look at the activities that gave you energy and you find the pattern. Maybe you like the photography project and writing short captions about what you noticed. The underlying theme might be that you enjoy observing details, making sense of visual information, and expressing it clearly. Now, you can use that pattern to upgrade your experiments. Next weekend, instead of just organizing photos, you might try helping a friend design a simple flyer for their small business. As you slowly scale up these little experiments, you get a little more feedback, a little more control, and a clearer sense of what actually makes you feel alive. Your long-term direction may slowly start to gain shape from these experiences. And that's exactly the signal we are looking for. Not that you've solved your whole future, but that your system is finally waking up again. So let's put this all together. When your life gives you too little control, feedback, and connection for too long, your system starts saving energy. That is why thinking harder often does not get you out of languishing. The sandbox works because it gives your brain fresh evidence that small actions can create feedback. Feedback can bring back energy, and energy can slowly turn into direction. So while the word languishing, is scientifically useful. I know it can sound a little bleak. It makes it sound like you're just fading away or falling behind everyone else. That is why the writer Austin Kleon offered a much gentler way to look at this. He suggested that maybe we aren't languishing. Maybe we are just dormant. Think of a plant in winter. When the soil lacks nutrients or the environment is too harsh, it pulls all its energy inward. It stops blooming just to survive. When you have been living with too much pressure, too little control, and too little connection, something similar can happen psychologically. Your system may slow down to conserve energy. Dormancy is simply a natural pause in visible growth. The artist Corita Kent once wrote, "New things are happening very quietly inside of me." And I think that is a beautiful way to understand where you are right now. Something new is probably taking shape inside you too. It just needs the right conditions before it can surface. The real goal here isn't to force a perfect career plan overnight. It is simply to help you get moving again and let the motivation catch up with you later. To make this as easy as possible, I put together a free PDF for you. It includes the 3-phase sandbox template, the if-then planning tools, and a simple tracker to help you notice what actually gives you energy. You can download it using the link in the description below. And hey, if you go through this process and eventually find yourself with the opposite problem, too many interests, too many sparks, and no idea which one to pick, that is actually a great sign. It means your internal engine is back online. When that happens, you can go watch our previous video on building an M-shaped life. Thanks for watching. I hope this gives you something useful you can actually try, and I will see you in the next one.